On September 26, 2024, at 11:10 p.m., Hurricane Helene raced ashore near Perry, Florida with sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. Yet no one knew that the worst the storm had to offer was several hours away, hundreds of miles from the ocean. This is the story of Hurricane Helene. Hurricane Helene began as a disturbance in the Western Caribbean. Slowly, the disturbance gained tropical characteristics on September 24th and was given the name Tropical Storm Helene. Model confidence was high, and Helene was already forecast to make landfall in the Big Bend with maximum sustained winds of 115 miles per hour, as well as track northward after landfall toward the Appalachian Mountains. Exactly 24 hours later, Helene was upgraded to a Category 1 hurricane with sustained winds of 80 miles per hour. Helene had grown to a large hurricane and was expected to grow even larger. Tropical storm warnings blanketed the coastline continuously from the Florida Panhandle through most of South Carolina's coastline. At this point, Helene was expected to make landfall as a 125-mile-per-hour Category 3, race inland, and stall over the Tennessee-Kentucky border. On the morning of September 26th, Helene began to intensify. It reached 100 miles per hour at 8 a.m. It reached 110 miles per hour at 2 p.m. Helene became a major hurricane with sustained winds of 125 miles per hour at 5 p.m. At 2 p.m., while Helene was rapidly intensifying, the National Weather Service Weather Forecast Office, located in Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina, issued one of the most chilling public information statements I've ever read. This will be one of the most significant weather events to happen in the western portions of the area in the modern era. Record flooding is forecasted and has been compared to the floods of 1916 in the Asheville area. The impacts from this event are expected to be greater than Tropical Storm Fred from August 2021, the mountains in 2004 from Francis and Ivan, and in upstate South Carolina, the Saladula River Basin flooding from 1949. We plead with everyone that you take every single weather warning very seriously through the entirety of this event, as impacts will be life-threatening. And make sure to have multiple ways to receive the alerts. The protection of life and property is the overall mission of the National Weather Service, and we pledge to stand by the folks of the Western Carolinas and Northeast Georgia. We cannot stress the significance of this event enough. Heed all evacuation orders from your local emergency managers and go to a storm shelter if you do not feel safe at your current location. As my dad and I got close to our target location, Madison, Florida, Helene further intensified into a Category 4 with sustained winds of 130 miles per hour. Hurricane Hounds has officially arrived in Florida. At 9 p.m., we arrived at our chase location, a Winn-Dixie parking lot in Madison, Florida. We were located about 40 miles from the Gulf Coast. The wind and rain was not far behind. The winds and rain began to pick up dramatically. The wind will be coming in a little bit of a different direction when we go to the eastern side of it, which I think is the side that we are expected to be on at some point here shortly. That's the power. That is the big power dip. Power is gone. At 11:10 p.m., Helene made landfall near Perry, Florida with sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. Roughly 10 to 15 minutes later, Madison entered the thick northern eye wall. The change was sharp. Large branches and sheets of metal began to fly across the parking lot, only illuminated by the truck's headlights. You could hear a lot, you could see only very little.
So we're right in it out here now at Fort Brady.
All right, thank you, sir. I appreciate the update. We are, I got to move along because Governor Ron DeSantis is now addressing the media with the latest information.
of the wind hammered the parking lot until around midnight when we entered the eye. The eye was a bit dirty with some smaller wind gusts. We were spared the backside of the eye because of a dry air intrusion which caused the southern eye wall to break apart. The storm continued to race inland. The area of tropical storm force winds slammed into the Appalachian Mountains around 6 a.m. The onslaught began. Helene was so destructive due to its PRE, precursor rain event. Not all of the rainfall that occurred over western Ensley was from Helene. A stalled front sat over the region for a couple of days. This caused the ground to be saturated with water before Helene ever got there. When Helene brought its double-digit rainfall totals, the ground couldn't handle it. The water that failed to seep into the ground raced down the face of the mountain. This is what caused the incredible volume of water to surpass record river crest that had stood since the Great Flood of 1916. Coastal communities in the Big Bend region of Florida are no stranger to the impacts of tropical cyclones. In the previous 2 hurricane seasons, the region was hammered by Category 3 Hurricane Idalia and drenched by Category 1 Hurricane Debby, as well as the subject of this video, Category 4 Hurricane Helene. However, this one was unlike any previous storm. Helene pushed a storm surge of 12 to 16 feet into communities with ease. Communities impacted, some of which faced up to 10 feet of surge from Idalia, were close to being wiped off the map. Parts of the Florida Panhandle and southern Georgia faced up to a foot or more of rain, causing minor creek and river flooding. Frequency of an event like this one is hard to pin down. To forecast the future, we look at the past. In 1916, 2 tropical cyclones impacted western Ensley in the span of a week. The flooding was on a scale no one alive had seen, and a scale that was not reached again until it was surpassed by the flooding caused by Hurricane Helene. Unfortunately, climate change will likely make flooding like this more common. However, to what extent is completely unknown due to the technicalities that have to all be aligned to make an event like this possible. That being said, we know climate change will make stronger storms more common and increase rainfall due to increased moisture in the atmosphere. Stronger storms can make it further inland if their internal structure isn't compromised at landfall or if they have a fast forward speed like Helene. There are a lot of factors, so an event like this may not be common, but if we increase the chances of individual factors, it only makes sense to assume that the odds of all factors aligning would increase as well. Millions of people across the southeast were affected. Entire towns were destroyed in both Florida and western Ensley. Homes and businesses washed away. Parts of I-40 were deleted. Businesses halted and people were trapped and isolated due to the number of missing bridges. According to a report released by the National Hurricane Center, Helene caused a staggering $78.7 billion in damages, which placed Helene behind only Katrina, Harvey, Ian, Maria, Sandy, and Ida for costliest U.S. hurricane. Helene killed 250 people across the southeast, 157 in the Carolinas, and another 71 between Georgia and Florida. Weeks after the storm, many people were still without clean drinking water. Reported by the New York Times on October 25th, more than 150,000 municipal water customers in western Ensley remained under boil water notices, and roughly 40% of private wells that were tested contained water unsafe to drink. Unfortunately, there really isn't much that can be done to prevent a flood of this magnitude or the damage from it. However, people are rebuilding and long-term recovery initiatives are widespread. Construction of a new I-40 won't be finished until 2028. However, one lane in each direction reopened in March with a reduced speed limit. The new section of I-40 is being built to withstand the forces of a Helene-equivalent storm. Helene will be remembered as the deadliest storm to strike the U.S. since Maria in 2017 and the deadliest to strike the U.S. mainland since Katrina in 2005. After the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season, the name Helene was retired by the WMO Hurricane Committee.